you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This is another of our popular Listener's Choice interviews, which we're playing over the weekend. We've chosen the most popular interviews for you to select the Listener's Choice winner. If you're not sure how the Listener's Choice competition works, have a look at horsechats.com/choice for the rules and the leaderboard. Horse welfare and safety are of utmost importance where humans have any interaction with horses. Within the courses at International Horse College, we only utilise methods that promote safe and humane ways of interaction between horses and humans. We only support safe methods of educating riders, handlers and trainers about horse welfare. internationalhorsecollege.com, registered training organisation 31352. 10 points for good gastrointestinal health. Now, Camilla Whishaw has already been on before. She's a bit of an expert in this particular area, which is why we've got her back. And if you'd like to find out a bit more about her, go to horsechats.com/Camilla Whishaw, which is WHISHAW, or just go to horsechats.com and search for Camilla, and I'm sure you'll find her. Now, Camilla, how are you today?
I'm very well, thanks, Glenys. How are
Perfect.
you?
Oh, very well, very well. Yep. And now we're going to learn a bit more about good gastrointestinal health, which is very important, I think, for horse lovers, horse owners, horse trainers, coaches, anyone that's got anything to do with horses. But tell us why you've chosen this particular subject today. You know, I know you're an expert in the area, but, you know, you've got a choice of choosing a few different areas. Why this one?
So, Glenys, for all horses, and any species for that fact, good health starts with the gastrointestinal tract or the gut.
Yep.
The more time goes on, the more research is providing us with firm evidence that there are clear links between the health and the state of the gastrointestinal tract, which from here on in I'll refer to as GIT. There's strong associations with immune health and GIT, inflammatory mediators in the body. So if you think of any inflammatory condition a horse suffers from, whether it's osteoarthritis, whether it's tendinitis, placentitis, it affects neurotransmitter production. So you've got your constantly cranky horse. It can play quite a significant role in that. It can influence skin health, so horses with ongoing skin issues. It's just get the health of the gut right and you will have a systemic flow-on effect, which will improve a lot of other areas of the body. So targeted treatment at specific conditions is all well and good, but until you adequately address and optimise gut health, you won't achieve all you can in promoting health in the rest of the body. Okay. So it's a very, very solid place to start with.
All right. Now, we've got a relationship here, I'm sure, between the gastrointestinal health and the teeth and oral health. Is there a relationship?
There's a big relationship, Glenys. So I think when a lot of us think of the gastrointestinal tract or stomach health or digestion, we immediately just think of the stomach and the small and large intestine. But really, gastric health starts in the mouth. So the mouth and the teeth are part of the digestive system. For many reasons, it's really important that horses are able to chew their food properly. So this begins both mechanical and chemical digestion of food. So mechanically, it's grinding it into smaller particles, which then allows enzymes and hydrochloric acid throughout the body to break the food down further. The production of adequate saliva in the horse is so important for so many reasons. So firstly, saliva contains one of our enzymes that begins digestion, salivary amylase. So that works at breaking carbohydrates down into smaller units. Saliva also contains bicarbonate, which is such an important buffer in the gut. So if we're thinking of horses with ulcers, horses that are at risk of ulcers, their natural production of bicarbonate is one of their very effective mechanisms against this. So it's another reason why horses consuming adequate fibre and roughage, so your grass and hay, and grazing constantly is really, really important to keep producing that saliva. So you've got the salivary bicarbonate in it to buffer and protect against the gut.
I'm just wondering about feeds. A lot of people wet down their feeds. Does that impact on the making of saliva
production? Not so much from what we understand. I don't know that a whole lot of research has been done in that area. And I certainly, on the whole, encourage people to dampen down feeds when they're feeding, mainly to reduce the inhalation of particulate matters, so dust and other irritants, which can cause inflammation and mucus production in the airway. So we know that if we dampen feeds, we reduce those levels, which in turn reduces airway inflammation. So I don't know that it's an area that has been studied extensively, but we know that saliva is produced by the horse in response to chewing. So we want to encourage that chewing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On that too, saliva contains antibody called secretory IgA, which is a really, really important first line of the immune system, so defending against pathogens, things that we, could potentially turn into bugs within the horse. So it's really, really important mechanism to help fight against that. We need to be looking at the state of the horse's teeth, so making sure there are no sharp edges or mouth ulcers or cuts, because a horse that's in pain in its mouth, much like a human, is going to not chew its food so well. So if it's not chewing so well, it's not producing the saliva so much, which is not then getting the secretory IgA flowing and the bicarbonate production.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another area of research which is becoming more and more exciting is the link of gingivitis, so inflammation of the gums and in the oral cavity. There's quite strong human evidence and research done in other animal species. It'd be lovely to see some done in a horse or horses to show that oral inflammation has a strong link with systemic inflammation and illnesses, so things like arthritis, reduced immune function. We know it has impacts on fertility, so, your mare that's having trouble getting in foal, it's not going to be your be-all and end-all solution, but certainly you want to be considering the state of her mouth and her teeth and her oral health. So on teeth and oral health, it's really important to monitor that regularly, having your equine dentist or your vet attending to their teeth and mouth every 6 to 12 months, and as responsible owners and riders and caretakers, checking their mouth, checking their teeth, checking they haven't got anything stuck, different seeds and things stuck in their mouth that could be causing them pain. Because good digestion starts with the mouth.
Yep. And there's so much to learn. We always think about performance horses and we want to make sure that the teeth, the oral health, that everything's right there. But, broodmares, looking in their mouth to make sure that it's good and healthy, they're not getting in foal, that could be some relationship there. It's just so holistic, isn't it?
It is. And, that's why, part of the joys of my job is looking at all these factors and pulling them all together, because often we'll look at one or two things and not consider the whole picture. And sometimes one thing will have a huge difference on its own. Other times there might be 4 or 5 factors, but they all need to be addressed to optimise our outcomes, whether that's performance or reproduction or normal growth and maturity of the horse. So it's really important that when people are considering their horse's GIT health, they start with the mouth.
Okay. Now, what about the feed then? Can we talk about the fibre and the roughage that's required in the diet?
Certainly, Glenys. So horses, we know, are designed as grazing animals. They have a constant production of hydrochloric acid, which is one of the main digestive enzymes in the stomach. Unlike humans and some other species who only produce hydrochloric acid in response to food, horses are constantly producing it, which means if there's not something in their stomach protecting the lining of their stomach, they're more at risk of ulcers because they've got that acidic hydrochloric acid in their stomach. So that's why one of the many reasons why it's so important that the horse is consuming plenty of fibre and preferably spread throughout the day, so they're constantly grazing. So there's always something lining their guts. As we touched on with oral health, it's so important through the effect of chewing for the production of the bicarbonates in the saliva. Again, that adds to the protective effect, and the more fibre and more fibrous feeds a horse consumes, the more chewing they're doing, so the greater the production of those bicarbonates.
Okay.
Again, on chewing more, we know that saliva helps protect the teeth enamel. So again, the more fibre and roughage they're consuming, the more they're chewing, and they're going to get protective effect on the teeth, so less likely to have caries and rotting teeth. Fibre is absolutely essential to feed the gut microbiome. So horses have, as do all mammals, have a balance of bacterial species in their gut.
Yep.
Now, some of them are beneficial, to be put simply. Some of them are not so beneficial. We know that a higher fibre diet promotes those beneficial bacteria, which in turn has positive impacts on immune function, on inflammatory levels, on neurotransmitter production, as opposed to lower fibre diets, which are more likely to promote what we call dysbiosis. So that's bacteria that aren't favourable to a horse's health. Put simply, they will be in high proportion to the beneficial ones. So we want to feed these good bacteria, and these good bacteria thrive on fibre.
Okay.
Fibre is also, a lot of people don't realise that fibre is a really important energy source in the horse. So it's broken down in the large intestine to produce what are called short-chain fatty acids or volatile fatty acids. These are end products of bacterial fermentation, and they're broken down into acetate, propionate, and butyrate. And they're really valuable energy sources for a horse. So often people won't realise that even a horse that has higher energy requirements can have a proportion of those energy needs met through a high fibre diet, providing their GIT is in good health. So providing they've got those healthy bacteria which are able to break down the fibre to convert to an energy source.
All right.
And again, the fibre with the action of the microbes in the gut are really essential for production of some of our vitamins, such as the B group vitamins and vitamin K. So without adequate fibre, it's very, very hard to produce optimal levels of those vitamins.
All right. What about the concentrate then? You've talked about how beneficial the fibre and the roughage is in the diet. What about for horses that have high energy needs? What can we use there to help the horse?
So, Glenys, first and foremost, we want to know that we've got their GIT in a healthy state. So I like to ensure that we've prescribed herbs and nutrients and dietary management strategies that promote what we call healthy intestinal epithelial cells. So that's the lining of the intestines. If that's healthy, we're able to better utilise the food we intake.
And then this is before we actually introduce the concentrate feeds, is it?
Correct. Yeah, we want to know that what our horse is ingesting and digesting, that they can effectively use that, because if their gut health is in a poor state, they're not able to break down the food properly. They're not able to have the on-flow effect of proper energy production. So we really need to restore good GIT health. There will still be horses that indeed do need higher energy intakes, whether it's through competition, through growth stages, their training. So in those cases, we still want to make sure that the horse is consuming a minimum of 1.5 to 2% of their body weight in dry matter each day to ensure they're getting enough of that fibre. And then above and beyond that, we like to look at feeds and feed sources that provide added benefits to the diet beyond just energy. So if we look at things like beet pulp, again, that's a fibrous product, but it's great for horses with high energy needs. If we're looking to add fat sources for energy needs, look at ones that have added benefits, such as flaxseed meal. If we tend to like to feed more grain for various reasons, things like boiled barley, which have a mucilaginous effect on the gut. So although some horses do better on a lower grain diet, boiling barley just starts that digestive process for the horse, as well as giving the gut lining a bit more protection.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's really important with horses that have higher energy needs is trying to avoid as much as we can the use of poor quality oils and oils that are higher in omega-6 fatty acids. So these promote inflammation. A small amount of omega-6 in the diet is necessary, but most horses tend to receive far too much, which then promotes inflammation and alters immune function, among other things. So although it can be very tempting to go, I can buy a 20-litre drum of corn oil very cheaply, you need to think what that's going to cost your horse in their health and performance.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's some of the key points. I'm definitely not against the use of high energy and high concentrate feeds, but we need to incorporate them as part of a holistic plan. So balancing out the diet and management strategies in other areas to make sure we keep good GIT health. When we're feeding them too, it's always really good to combine them with a high fibre source. So that'll help slow the digestion down a bit and provide a source of fibre and roughage to help promote a better bacterial balance. So, you know, we grew up feeding horses oats mixed with lucerne, and although, you know, there are both pros and cons for it, as a simple practice, it was good in that you did have the high energy source, but you also had the lucerne, the fibre in that to help slow things down and to help promote chewing.
Okay, all right. Now, what about the use of antibiotics? How does that optimise gut flora? Just tell us a little bit more about the use of antibiotics.
Okay, so antibiotics are definitely, you know, a life-saving and very important part of veterinary medicine in many cases, but we really need to question our use of them. I'm not at all for prophylactic use of them for the sake of just because or just in case. Mm-hmm. They really need to be well indicated, both in terms of helping to reduce the great impact we're continually becoming resistant to more and more antibiotics. And part of the problem or part of the reason for this is because people, you know, have just used them a bit willy-nilly, or they think their horse is getting a snotty nose, so they'll put them on antibiotics.
Okay.
Really, they should only ever be used on recommendation by vets, mm-hmm. And for very good reason. We also need to consider the fact that antibiotics disrupt the gut microbiome. Mm-hmm. So okay. We want those good bacteria in abundance and the bad, inverted commas, bad bacteria at minimal levels. Anytime you use antibiotics, it kills off both the good and bad bacteria. Mm-hmm. Obviously, antibiotics are effective against bacterial infections, which is a really important key to remember. So there's no point giving a horse with viral infection antibiotics. Antibiotics are there to kill bacteria. So they get rid of the nasties, but they also wipe out all the good bacteria, which then for issues what we call dysbiosis. So after all the good and beneficial bacteria are gone, the gut needs to re-establish a bacterial balance. And unless we've implemented feeding and strategies, more often than not, they will be overpopulated with bad bacteria, which then sets us up for more inflammation, more immune problems, chronic infections, things like that. So it's really, really important that if and when we use antibiotics, at how we read the gut microbiota. Okay. Our horse knows some probiotics or a course of probiotics. Now, probiotics are an important part of re-establishing a healthy gut microbiome. That colony of probiotics establish themselves and continue to multiply and grow. And if we don't give them their feed source of prebiotics, that's not able to happen. For those horse owners that do need to use antibiotics in their horse and choose to use probiotics too, we really need to consider the timing of administration of probiotics in conjunction with the timing of the antibiotics.
If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com. All right. Now, what about their NSAIDs and how can they support the gut health, during the use, after their use? What information have you got us there?
Again, so NSAID, so we're thinking of phenylbutazone, so bute, flunixon, Equiox, your common anti-inflammatory drugs. Again, their discriminative use is really, really important. Obviously, they're very valuable pharmaceutical, both in pain and in controlling potential inflammation, but we really, really need to review how we use them. We know now too, there's evidence to show that NSAIDs alter the intestinal microflora just as antibiotics do, and they also compromise intestinal integrity. So that healthy lining in the intestines, which we want to make that healthy, both to prevent infection and excessive inflammation, and to optimise uptake of nutrients. So NSAIDs are known to damage that. And people often think of this in simplest terms of associating the use of bute with the formation of gastric ulcers.
Yep.
So they can do that, but if they need to be used, make sure it's for a very good reason and only use where indicated. If they need to be used, we need to still promote a high-fibre diet where possible, so to give us some protection against gastric lining damage.
Okay.
One thing that concerns me is people will often think, I'll put my horse on gastric ulcer medication at the same time. One study has been done to show that this actually has a worse effect on gastrointestinal health than giving bute or NSAIDs alone. So I'm very, very cautious about the use of combining your omeprazole and Gastrogard or Ulcergard with bute. A lot of people are under the illusion that giving those two drugs together is beneficial. I'm very much against the use of post-race or post-event bute just in case. In inverted commas, people go, well, my horse might pull up sore, I'll give it some bute. So if that's your line of thinking, I'd strongly encourage you to review why you think you need to use it. Is your horse properly conditioned for the event or exercise it's meant to undertake? And look at feeding it, look at feeding practices, look at training practices, look at exercise practices, which may be contributing to excessive inflammation or pain. One other important point on NSAIDs is they stop the production of the majority of inflammation pathways. There are now newer drugs on the market which are selective in the inflammatory pathways they block. But by and large, all of them block all the major inflammatory pathways. Some of the horse's inflammatory pathways are actually very beneficial to their health, both to immune function and particularly in relation to gastric health. One of the pathways produces a substance called mucin, which again is another one of the horse's natural protective methods to protect their gut lining against damage. So if you shut down all inflammation, you then shut down mucin production as well. So you've just lost another defence barrier against hydrochloric acid or other potential gut irritants. So it's really, really important that when you do use NSAIDs that you have a very good reason to, and that you have an effective nutritional and supplementation program in place to give the body what it needs to restore the health of the gastrointestinal tract.
I was going to ask you about products like Ulcergard, and you've talked about, the use of them with NSAIDs, but what about just using them without antibiotics, without NSAIDs? What about just the use of them themselves?
So, Glenys, I think it's a practice that needs to be looked at from a holistic perspective, and we need to ask ourselves why we're using them. In the case of chronic ulcers, they can be effective, although there are many nutritional and some herbal products that, when used appropriately, can help heal and repair the gastric lining. So that would definitely be my first port of call. I have a real issue when people have their horses constantly on Gastrogard or Ulcergard or omeprazole-containing products. the way these products work is by stopping the production of hydrochloric acid. So hydrochloric acid is essential for horses to break down the food they consume to help them extract the nutrients they need from the feed, to help make sure that only fibrous products are broken down in the large colon to produce those beneficial bacteria. If we stop hydrochloric acid production, we alter the whole digestive process, which, long story short, leads to dysbiosis in the large intestine. So then we're creating an environment that promotes inflammation, that lets pathogens thrive. It's also really important to remember that hydrochloric acid is not only necessary for digestion, but it also has a strong function in the immune system, in that the acidic nature of it kills off a lot of ingested pathogens. So stop hydrochloric acid and you're taking away another line of immune defence. So if your horse is on ulcer guard, you need to be reviewing why you're using it. You need to be reviewing your management and feeding practices and strategies. So that's an area I really, really think people need to stop and think hard about.
I think, Camilla, I really like the way that you're looking at the holistic health. You know, we're here to talk about gastrointestinal health, but you're looking at the whole thing holistically, and we're looking at why, if we need to use these products, it's not just to fix the problem, but how this is affecting the overall health of the horse. And I think, coming from your point of view, you know, I just think that's, I love it.
Thanks.
Tell us about strategic drenching of the horse.
Okay, so we've gone through, different phases or cycles or approaches with how we drench horses and parasite control.
Mm-hmm.
And again, although I'm a naturopath and I like to keep things as natural as possible through whether it's management and dietary practices or supplementation of herbs or nutrients, I'm of the opinion that our standard chemical drenches do have an important role to play in healthy horse management, but I'm also of the view that we need to use them appropriately, both to reduce resistance to our different drenches. So just like we've created our own problems with antibiotic resistance, we've also done that to a large extent with different drenches. So we know that significant parasitic loads in the horse, so different types of worms, can cause significant damage to the gut, which again is going to have inflammatory effects systemically and poor immune effects systemically. So we certainly don't want our horses burdened with worms, but at the same time we don't want to overuse drenches and chemicals, both for the horse's health and, if you think about, the flow and effect to the environment too, and farmland and agriculture. So I tend to have most of my clients undertake strategic drenching. So depending on the horse, their health, the stage of a program they're in, we will look at their egg counts, horses' egg counts, and tend to only target drenching specific parasites when they've got an egg count of about 150 to 200 eggs per gram. Having said that, some external parasites and bots will still need to be drenched for regardless, because we either don't test for them or our screening practices for them aren't great. So usually early to midsummer, I will get my clients to use an ivermectin or moxidectin-based drench to drench against these. And we also need to consider that labs that do test for tapeworms aren't necessarily all that sensitive. So we seem to think there's a bit of a lag in the clinical detection of tapeworm eggs and their presence. So again, once a year and generally in the summer, I'll recommend the clients drench against tapeworms regardless. So again, it's incorporating the use of conventional, whether you want to call them chemicals or practices or medications, using them in a holistic context, because certainly high worm loads or parasite loads do have detrimental health effects. At the same time, we need to be thinking about practices that we can do, like regularly picking up our manure or harrowing paddocks, just to reduce that worm and parasite burden. So, putting that in a holistic context.
Okay. Okay. Now, earlier on, we talked about the fibre, the roughage, the appropriate use of concentrates or high energy feed. So we talked about the type of feed, but what about how we feed? Have you got tips for us on that?
Yeah, certainly, Glenys. So again, I think horse people wanting to do their best, we can get very caught up in just what we feed and not necessarily how we feed. So as I touched on earlier, horses, their digestive system is designed for them to be constantly grazing and constantly eating. So if you've got a horse that does have higher energy needs, giving it 1 or 2 massive feeds a day and then leaving it for the rest of the day without feed or with minimal roughage in between really isn't promoting healthy GIT function and isn't optimal for their health. So with horses that do require feeds and higher energy feeds, try to make those into smaller feeds and where as practical as possible, space them throughout the day, especially horses that are in a stable environment too. So especially consider that. Again, when we can, make sure that they have plenty of roughage. For a horse with lower energy needs, consider hay that's, we all love our rich, hay that's very, green or, of very good quality. Still good quality hay, but less energy dense hay can be really beneficial. Hay that's soaked or steamed, if your horse has less energy requirements, but still to give it the beneficial effects of the fibre.
Okay.
When we're feeding, I encourage people to feed from ground level. Again, it's important to make sure manure is regularly picked up and using good quality feed bins can help protect against things like that. But feeding at ground level allows the horse to get its head down, which allows good mucociliary clearance and drainage of airways. So it's good for recovery and just good natural health. And it's, horses, that's the way they spend the majority of their time grazing. So nature's got a very good reason for that.
Yes.
As I touched on earlier, mixing our concentrates with roughage. So if your horse does require higher energy feeds, mix lucerne or other types of chaff through that to give it a bit of roughage.
Okay.
For horses who are undertaking strenuous work, so racehorses and other horses in training, there's evidence to suggest that giving them about 500 grams of lucerne or lucerne chaff shortly, sort of half an hour to an hour before work, can help line the gut effectively, both from a physical sense and from the presence of magnesium and calcium, which just gives a buffer against hydrochloric acid when they're working out. So that amount of food tends to sit comfortably in the stomach for a horse in intense work while giving it a bit of protection. Another thing we need to consider is that when we are changing a feed regime with a horse, whether it's the addition of concentrates or a mix of feed or types of hay, we want to make those changes as gradual as possible as sudden shifts in microflora occur in response to sudden changes in feed. And this can have really significant impact on the horse's health and is often associated with conditions such as colic. So where possible, do a gradual transition. If you've started suddenly sourcing your hay from elsewhere, if you can gradually introduce that hay as you're finishing off the old batch of bales you've got, just things like that are really important to keep in mind.
If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com. Just thinking about, you talked about racing or just horses that are in a high stress environment or horses that are just by temperament, by personality, highly stressed. How does that have, what sort of effect does that have on their digestion and their gut health?
So, Glenys, digestion is under influence or occurs through actions of the nervous system. Now, put simply, there are several different divisions of the nervous system or branches. Digestion is largely under the influence of what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, there's another division of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, and they tend to work in opposition to each other. So we keep in mind that the parasympathetic nervous system is associated with rest and digesting, and the sympathetic nervous system is associated with stress, anxiety, high levels of high-intensity exercise, things like that. So we want to be promoting the parasympathetic nervous system to optimise digestion, to help promote normal GIT motility. If we're feeding a horse that's constantly stressed, whether it's been separated from mates or it's in a situation where horses are constantly fighting for feed and it's in the lowest pecking order, that's going to send its sympathetic nervous system into overdrive and sort of shut down the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system, which we need for healthy digestion. So we need to try and avoid as much as possible, particularly when we're feeding a horse, to expose it to overly stressful situations. So, feeding horses in mobs can have beneficial effects, providing there's not the same horses that are constantly getting picked on. And if that's the case, look at separating the horses at feeding time, but sort of having them in an area where they can see each other. Horses are social animals and tend to be more relaxed and calm in an environment with other horses. So try and feed horses at the same time. For horses that are in stable situations, try and minimise the time that lapses between getting feeds prepared and starting off feeding and having horses that are banging doors and things like that, because that's all affecting digestive function. And we know that stress does alter the microbial balance in the GIT and not favourably. So just look at different ways we can minimise stress, particularly around feed times. And on that too, there was a study done to show that it was done in Australian racing stables to show that horses that have the radio on in the background that was on the racing station, so the horses could hear the races being called, those horses demonstrated higher levels of stress.
Did they?
Which we can then think of higher instances of gastric ulcers and things like that. So if you're in a barn environment or a racing stable environment, seriously consider turning off the racing station or not having it constantly playing. As funny as it sounds, it has been shown to promote cortisol release and stress in horses.
All right. Now, for our listeners, we always want to have something to learn, and we've learned quite a lot. There's quite a few tips that you've given us. We've sort of talked about 10 points or 10 tips, but I think there's been quite a few more than that, 10 main ones mainly, but lots and lots of subheadings there. What about what changes do they need to make to their feeding, or, talk to us about the changes to feeding to support their health, the gut health?
So I think probably some simple, actionable takeaway points for listeners are to make sure their horses' diets are high in fibre, high in roughage.
Okay.
They are constantly grazing or consuming hay, and if we need to slow down the rate at what they consume it, putting in appropriate measures to do that. Any dietary changes, if they're made, should be done gradually, so to ensure a smooth change of GIT microflora, because we don't want to go changing anything abruptly, even if, as contradictory as it sounds, we don't want to abruptly go changing from really poor microflora to really good microflora, as that in itself can cause colic and other GIT distress. So make any changes really, really gradually. Manure, monitoring your horse's manure is one of the easy ways you can sort of help, that can be used by owners to sort of help dictate this, although I wouldn't rely on that solely, but it can be quite helpful. Another important thing is to minimise the intakes of fats which drive inflammation, so those poor quality vegetable oils, corn oils, things like that. It's another really, really simple change owners can make. Don't forget the importance of exercise to ensure good bowel motility, so you can feed the best feeds and supplements and things. But if your horse isn't getting that basic movement to help promote the passage of food throughout their GIT, you're going to encounter problems. So, horses that are kept in stables, we really need to make sure they're getting their exercise. And then, obviously horses that are on strict stable rest, we then need to look at how we can help support those horses.
Okay.
But yeah, just any changes you make them slowly, and start with the basics, getting your fibre right, cutting out those poor quality feeds and oils, making sure meal sizes are smaller and spread throughout the day. Things like that are really easy actionable steps.
Okay. All right, lots of actionable steps, not just those last few that you've given us, but I suppose they're the main points. And then, Camilla, how can people contact you if they'd like to know a little bit more, find out a bit more about, what you're doing to help horses?
So they can visit my website at www.optimequine.com. So that's optimequine.com.
Yes.
They can email me, Camilla, CAMILLA, at optimequine.com. And on my website, it's my phone number, as well as you can email from my website. I've also got Optimum Equine on Facebook, so I'll regularly post just, little handy snippets, bits of information, things for owners and managers and riders to consider in relation to their horse and horse health. So they're probably the best ways to contact me, learn a bit more and see how we can help you and help your horse.
Perfect. All right, Camilla, those details will be on Horse Chat's website as well. That'll be horsechats.com/Camilla Whishaw, and you'll see previous interview, but they're all sort of linked together. Or horsechats.com/Camilla Whishaw 2, or just go to horsechats.com and search for Camilla, search for Whishaw, WHISHAW, and you'll find contact details as well as links to previous chat. Camilla, thank you. Thank you for all the tips. Thank you for, just lots and lots of information. Just, it wasn't 10 tips, as I said. There was just lots there and really talking about the holistic horse. And I think, just doing things to improve the welfare of the horse, which is what we're all about. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll catch up sometime soon.
My pleasure, Glenys, and thank you. And, thank you to all the Horse Chat listeners. So... it's been great.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.